Ne jana ko wo wo be ha den ste. Ne jana ko den go be ha den ste. Hey yana hey 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 yana. Ne jana ko wo wo yoth kwe be ha den ste. Ne jana ko wo wo be ne takis.
Akondisi ajabe shein ish on kohontis akodi wala beha is alia chita no joe alsab belganik jobe khishna wala chno yega alla en leche nina halongat alia ba konsen lechenda والخارج كيتعيش ولا به شياجة إن شخا هذا بقول جن بجنو جو إيخد إسات ولا نني إيخد باكنسن أحيانا.
When I hear the phrase "I'll with a bit," I think of when you are out cheering and you're trying to catch one of those last withers, and he flies through the air, headbutts you in the eye, leaves you with a nice bruiser, and then you continue shearing. You get it done. You figure out a way to make it work despite everything that may be mounting against you. That's what I think about. And then you plan the next butchering.
Man, there's a song from Bruce Springsteen, and it's our anthem song. Because when we're down and out, I put that song on, and it says there's going to be hard times coming, there's going to be good times coming, but there's also going to be hard times coming. Swing that ball at me, because I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work as hard as I can to do what needs to be done. It's just being honest and upfront and working your butt off. Bring that wrecking ball on is all I can say, and that's what the word is that.
Ne jana ko wo wo be ne takis. Ne jana ko den go be ha den ste. Hey yana hey 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 yana. Ne jana ko wo wo do teji be ha den ste. Ne jana ko wo wo.
Welcome back, everybody, to our series Tal Withipe. My name is Christine Ami, and I am the grant manager for the Navajo Cultural Arts Program here at Diné College. I wanted to welcome our guest to the series today with Mr. JT Willie. If you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, yate Christine Ado Arnold Skoshik Edo Shtkazin She Adone Ainsley Etkapaha Ainsley Ado Táchiinii Bashchin Ashihi Edas Chedokia Ani Dashanale Ado She Bas Adent IECA Nasha Ado she is a JT Willie agency Ado Division of Economic Development, the Navajo Nation Division Economic Development Division Director Sadly the Nek Echiko Eya Nanish Kanchkarigate 8 IEC Hojogoshi the Nihe business owners do and lay Tatnas Niledo Nihe Beshbas Anado Nihinant Anidas Dahiki Ba Hojogoshi Bilna Anishdo Bekena Anishkodo Lake. So IEC here Doba Against and Christine though the Navajo Cultural Arts Program for having me today.
Not a problem. I'm super excited to have you on, as well as our Navajo Cultural Arts Program Coordinator, Crystal Littleben. I first met JT, like we were playing like phone tag for a hot second when the Cultural Arts Program got started up we were trying to figure out like what kind of collaborations could we have, how could we work with, I think at that time you were over at NACE, and so we were playing phone tag, and so that was one of the first introductions that I had to JT. And then all of a sudden we went to the Herd, and I saw JT Willie had a booth set up down at the Herd Museum, selling his beautiful pieces, which we're going to get into plenty of discussion to today. And here you are today. I know even before that, we worked together on the Miss Navajo committee. We were together. I was taking care of the butchering competition, and you were helping with the, I believe, the 5K series that Miss Navajo had. So it's wonderful to bring you back on, because we've never had the opportunity to discuss you as a artist and you as a silversmith and a beater. And one of the things that really stood out to me, especially since I work with all these silversmiths, is how you incorporate these very two unique styles of art form into one arena. So I'm really excited to have you on board with us today. And I guess without further ado, I guess one of the first questions that we have for you today is, how did you're a third generation, right, artist. Can you tell us a little bit about your introduction to the arts?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And also that recollection of where we have come from and where we all first met each other. Seems like time flies a lot in my perspective nowadays, especially being in the capacity that I am currently in. But as far as art has always been a identity of who I am as a young person growing up. It's been in my family for generations, actually. My grandfather, Shiche Tom Bigay, and my grandmother, my late grandmother, Sally Ann Bigay, were kind of the initiators of silversmithing. And my mom and also my aunties were part of that perspective when it came to growing up within the family, and also selling art, and also being with them on various art shows, to the Tucson Gym Show that takes place annually in the early or late winter, actually. And of course, my mother did various genres of art, from weaving to all of her different various sewing projects that she also does. And so it's always been something I grew up with. And then eventually I picked up a lot of the different techniques from them, from watching them, learning. They probably didn't know they were teaching me at the time, but I learned step-by-step processes, the very fundamental beginning of art to its foundation of how to really make concepts of organization of types of art. Silversmithing was something my Che always did. So sitting in his work studio and watching him, observing him using the torch, all of those things, it just seemed so natural to me. And I think the best advantage that I had for it was that all of those tools were always there, and they were always available, and they were there waiting for someone to kind of pick it up and go from there with it. And then of course, going into college, you kind of find the needs to connect yourself in some way. I went to school away from here, well, just down the road at Albuquerque, and being away from home those times during the week, I needed that connection in some way. And so I met some really good friends who were of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma, and I learned how to bead from them. I picked up the concept of beadwork from them, and it got to the point where I was entrusted with a lot of cultural significant family designs from certain family members of this tribe, the Somtakoi, the Satoke, the Flying Man, and also learning from them of what these designs mean. And of course, coming back home and picking up the silversmithing again and running with it, basically. And at some point, it's learning to see the higher demographics of what art can do for our Native people, whether it's in being placed in museums, being recognized at art shows. At the very beginning, that was one of my main goals, was to be recognized at some level of opportunity possible. And so now at the age of, I'm 36 now. Yeah, I'm 36 now. I think you forget after you turn 30, but I kind of just feel like that you reach those areas of opportunity and you look to support someone else to find their way when it comes to building themselves up as artists. So that's kind of a background and where the art comes from for me.
You know, I think that that's one of the things that we've really been pulling out. It's funny because Emmy Whitehorse was on our last segment, and so she was talking about going to Albuquerque and studying over there and the impact of making collaborations, not just within our own tribe, but also outside, right? Outside influence. She was specifically talking about a lot of Western techniques. And so, but it's not just to Western techniques that we can also pull from these types of innovative arenas. It's with other tribes and collaborative, respectful, right? Understanding of how we can pull these types of different types of art forms together in dialogue. So I think that that's really unique and something that we've been hearing over and over again throughout the series. So when you started, when did you have the idea? I guess that's one of the things that always intrigues me when I see beadwork and silverwork come together. When did you start understanding how you could bring those two designs together and those fabrication processes together?
That concept was created back in 2008, and I was working for Navajo Arts and Craft at the time. I started working there my senior year of high school, and then from there, I continually worked with the organization, the enterprise, through my college career. First starting out college at UNM Gallup, and eventually making my way to the main campus in Albuquerque through my bachelor's and my master's programs. Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise catered me through my college career. And working for them, I grew with the organization. And that's been one of the things my parents have been very strict with me, is that don't be that person that kind of goes from here to there. Grow with the organization, develop yourself professionally and mindfully with what you want to do. So being at Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise, I started as a sales associate at Hormoon Apparel. And it's through this organization that I met so many people as my former customers, and fitting them with the best in Western wear and apparel. And then of course on the jewelry side with what we had available from various artists. And working with these artists, you really learn to work with what I like to call the grassroots artists, those that are kind of not at the predominant level as some of these artists. And you see their concept of art, and you see the need for how they need this income for art as well. And so as we continue to move forward through this organization, I grew a stronger concept and learning from them. And it got to the point where my CEO at the time entrusted me to start going to various art shows on behalf of the organization. The Indian Arts and Craft Association was one of the first shows that I attended. And then from there, kind of expanded out to the Tucson gym shows, what's called the JCK jewelry show. Just talking about this makes me want to go back to arts and craft, actually. So I miss that. That's the arena that built me and gave me the foundation that I needed, and it allowed me to expand into the person I become professionally. And I'm very thankful to my CEO at the time, Miss Barbara McGough, for being that person to kind of cater me through the process. And so at one show that I went to in Albuquerque, it was downtown Albuquerque at the convention center, at the DoubleTree actually. And I met Mr. Al Joe. And Mr. Joe, coming from Southwestern Navajo, had this concept of what he was doing with the beads at the time. He called it macrame. And learning and seeing from him, he was also awarded that top award for Artist of the Year. After that, my path was set to, that's what I want to be. And I want to do that. And how am I going to accomplish that? Because it seemed like the only way you could do that was kind of developing some sort of unique concept. And then it's coming from there that orientation of the two mediums coming together was created. And so I combined the beadwork, I built the beadwork, and then I developed the silverwork around it. A majority of my silverwork mentorship came from the late Ronald Cohn, who was one of our silversmiths with Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise. And we would work after hours, after the store shut down at 6 o'clock, and we would sit there in that work studio that we had at the old Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise before it was renovated. And we would work on different concepts. He would show me, he would allow me to mess up, and he would allow me to, you know, enhance and do this and do this and do that. And at first he would build and start the piece for me. Then he would hand it off for me to finish. Then it kind of turned into this point where he kind of stepped back and noticed that, hey, you can do this. And then so I brought the idea with the beadwork, because I used to do a lot of beaded tulip earrings when I first started doing a lot of beadwork. And I made one side. And what I dislike about making earrings is that after you finish one side, you have to do the other side. So that was always my biggest challenge, was like, I don't like make earrings. To this day, I still feel the same way. I rather make a ring and that's kind of it. But, you know, now you have people that were like, well, I want another ring to match this side. I'm like, let me try to do that for you. So that's my biggest, one of my biggest pet peeves, I guess you could call it. So I brought an earring in one time, finished tulip beaded earring. And I said, well, this fit in a silver. And that's when he said, I don't think so. You know, he was more of the old technique of silver work. And that's the image that I learned and what I use today in a lot of my work, a lot of heavy gauge work, 16 gauge, 18 gauge, 12 gauge. So those are the gauges he always worked with. And if you have one of the late Ronald Cohn's artistry work, you know his concept of how he built a lot of his pieces individually. And so that's how I use my concept. I soldered every piece together one by one. The moon shapes, the crescent shapes, the teardrops, they're all done one by one, and they're combined in the final piece. And so one day I experimented, and the piece was made. I developed that piece, and then from there, I entered it into an art show, and it caused a little bit of some controversy just because there was two mediums that came together, and there was no classification for this type of art. So I didn't win the first times that I entered this new concept, but I kept thinking like, well, we want innovation. We want people to expand. We want a different concept, and we don't want to limit ourselves to what people have come to know Navajo jewelry as, what they've seen published in books from, you know, the 80s or the 70s, like this is Navajo jewelry. So when I eventually got juried into the Santa Fe Indian Market and to the Heard Museum, I brought the concept with me. And of course, at first I didn't get much recognition for the combination, but who recognized it was who mattered to me. And that was the customers. That was the individuals that saw it and thought, this is so unique. And it kind of just took off after that. So this was my 10th year, this past year, being part of the Santa Fe Indian Market. Of course, it was a virtual year for us, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing my customers this year, hopefully. And this was also the 8th year that I was juried into the Heard Museum, also again, virtual this year. But it took off from there, and eventually a lot of different individuals from different mediums were doing unique styles. And so they started to create different classifications for those types of jewelry or types of art. And that's where a lot of these innovative classifications were created. And then so about 3 years ago, I finally won an innovation award from the Heard Museum for a sterling silver purse that I did with a beaded bell racer on it. And that was one of my pieces that kind of brought me to the forefront when it comes to the combination of this style of beadwork and silverwork.
I have here an example of that particular piece. Give me 1 second. Or one of the pieces, right, that you've been able to produce. And so this is an example of, you know, the combination of not just bringing together, right, silver and beads, but we also see stonework that's also incorporated in here. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about this particular piece at all.
Yeah, this one actually went north actually to a good friend named Cindy up in North Dakota. And this particular piece here is actually a combination of various types of materials. The dominant one is the silver. And of course, outside of the silver work, there's also a combination of what's called dentillium shell. And dentillium shell, coming from up northeast, is a crustacean, and it's mostly used on a lot of plain style of beadworks, plain style of dresses. And the beadwork, of course, is floral designs that are coming in together in shapes of flowers, which is some kind of, I would like to call one of my signature styles of look when it comes to using a lot of florals. I'm a very floral type person. My photo for the thing was, I was wearing a floral shirt, and I'm also wearing a floral shirt today. So I'm that floral person. And so I do a lot of beadwork around it. And the other stones included on this, which you can kind of see on the necklace itself, is the Druzy quartzite. And the Druzy stone is also become a quartzite stone that I become very familiar in working with. And I've been able to find great suppliers of this stone who have provided me a lot of different varieties of its natural form, as well as also some changes in its natural form, including some enhancements, just based off of the color conception of some of these stones. So I did combine all four of those methods together in this one. And it was entered into the herd last year, and it fortunately it didn't win a ribbon, but of course it went home to a great home. And as you can see in the flowers themselves, they're also bordered with number 8 turquoise beads. So the beads also are kind of like the natural concept to what Navajo is used to. But I combined different methods together on this one. Usually the dentillium necklaces don't have that sort of concept brought together, but I did envision it in this one.
No, it's great. It's fantastic in terms of these types of pieces are the pieces that I show our students right here in our Navajo Cultural Arts program. I show them these types of pieces primarily so that they can start thinking outside the box, especially like when we get our peers or we have a lot of students who like double emphasis. Let's say, for example, in weaving and silversmithing, we had a lot of this. Also brings to mind this other piece that you shared with us, right? A lot of moccasin makers who come in who also want to take a look at silversmithing. And so my thought process is, right, and this is also coming from a not silversmith. Like my husband does silversmith work, but I don't. And so I thought the way that I post them is like, well, maybe you could try this. And so like putting together, right, those types of mediums. And we actually did that, you know, and the students are really receptive to that kind of encouragement when they see it's being done and when they see it's being shown in the herd and at SWAIA. And I know a lot of people say, oh, well, you don't have to be successful to get into there, but it does provoke, right, inspiration. And so that's what we're always looking for our students. And you know, one of our workshop leaders, Troy Yintilly, we showed him some of your pieces and we're like, Troy, you should try this out. He's a beater. He works with feathers. He works with silver. And sure enough, he did it. And he took home a prize over at AHEC, right, wow, for a college competition. So I love seeing type of innovation. And it's so great to have you out on the scene demonstrating, right, what can be done. Like, how can we go ahead and pull these mediums together? This, we have a wonderful piece up right now, right, a leather piece. Did you want to talk us through a little bit about this particular piece?
Yeah, and just to really speak to Mr. Uintilly, I actually I worked at NACE at Navajo Craft Enterprise with his grandmother, his Nala, Linda Uintilly. She was there since day one of my employment, and she was there from my last day of employment with NACE. So that's an interesting circle that we just closed there. Actually, the piece on the screen right now is I call it Perfectly Unperfect. Perfectly Unperfect meaning that the inside is the tree of life. It's a tree of life beadwork. It's done with a pictorial style, a lot of line concepts, but however, the swirl backgrounds with the white kind of make it off balance with two different tone of colors of Charlotte cut beads. The Charlotte cuts are a 13 cut bead. Usually I work with a smaller micro bead, like a 22 or 24, but given the time of this one, I use the 13 Charlotte cut bead for this piece. And as you can see, it sits within a 6-inch sterling silver plate that's also edged at the top and on the bottom. As you can see on the sides are not perfectly cut. And I did that on purpose. I did it because of its meaning. And the outer border of the beadwork itself includes Sleeping Beauty turquoise. It also has abalone shell and coral. I'm really big on coral. My late grandmother was all about coral, and I will always be all about coral. We're Tábááhá, so the coral comes from the water, and we're of the water's edge. So there's a connection to the coral that I always include in pieces that I work on. And so the inside, and why I call it perfectly imperfect, is the inside is perfect. It's our Navajo way of life. It's the tree of life. It's what we're used to. It's what a lot of our weavers use in their rugs. It's what we see in sand paintings. It's basically, and then through that process, and when I started this job, it took me to places on Navajo that I never thought I would go. It took me to places where, unfortunately, I've never seen. And it took me to places to where I didn't grow up. I grew up in Twin Lakes, New Mexico, which is 15 miles north of Gallup. The nearest border town to us in Gallup was always accessible. And so growing up in the region, we always had access to the nearest highway. We had infrastructure later on after my dad built our home. And then we also had the ability to just jump on the highway and go east to Albuquerque or Grant or what have you. But when I took this job as the current division director for economic development, it took me to Western Navajo, it took me to Central Navajo, it took me to places that I've only driven through, but never had the opportunity to visit people one-on-one. And so when I was building this piece, I was getting ready for Santa Fe Indian Market. But that summer, I was 2019, I was also very busy traveling around the Navajo Nation for work. And so when you're in economic development, every chapter house wants you at their meetings to discuss economic development projects, growth development, regional development, what have you. And then so I came to a point where I was on the go all the time. And then out of nowhere, I was brought into this home. I had an opportunity to visit one of the individuals who gave up her land for the current NGS site up in Táchiinii. Well, what was the NGS site? The Navajo Generating Station. And I listened to her story of how to this day, since she gave up that land to where she didn't have access to water nor power. And she was determined. And the way she powered her home was through solar. And she also hauled her water in, which had an internal water valve system set up to where it could install from the outside with a water barrel. And she also used natural elements such as the collection barrels for water from the rain. And she was very determined in herself as an individual. But she spoke about how her late mother had been part of the agreements from 1969 on back of the surrendering of the land that they were living on once, and were moved right across the road from this huge industry that powered all of this energy to every other location except the Navajo Nation. City of Phoenix, city of Tucson, Nevada, city of Los Angeles. And then so it was very interesting to see how generations within this family grew up without those needed accessibilities. And we all can relate to such things in our upbringing. We were growing up in that way, in that manner. And then so this was one of many examples of places that I've been, and I've seen what you would consider real hardship. And you see that being identified right now in the newspaper. You see individuals who are being highlighted because they don't have a home. And so it brought a lot of sorrow to me at the same time. So I left this incomplete in a way to recognize what's not so perfect in our way of life as Navajo people. Of course, our way of life, our way of living, that pathway of life, we continue to look forward to. That's our foundation, that's our riches. And so the outside modern aspects of being rich, of having all these vehicles and beautiful homes, mean nothing to us other than who we are within our identity as Bala'ashlai. And so being Bala'ashlai, I have the ability to create things like what you see on the screen here, but I also have the ability to make change. And I can use this to sign a paper that will grant access to those needed necessities here. So that's what this piece interpreted to me. And I'm very fortunate that this piece went to one of my longtime collector friends up in Oregon. And she has probably about over 10 of my my award pieces like this, my show pieces that I work on. And when she purchased it, it was just this emotional feeling of how you shared the story of the people through your art, but you also shared the caringness that you wanted to portray outside of our realm as artists. And so this past year, she donated to the Navajo Artist Relief Fund. And that fund went to an artist who needed the income because they depend on their art for their way of life and living. So that's what this piece resembles. It's also made of natural deer hide, ehi. The edges are finished with white shell, abalone, and the bottom tassels are also of natural dyed churro sheep. And they're also hand dyed from natural plants as well. So I do as much as I can to keep it as less commercial as possible and make it unique for what it represents. So I'll turn it back to you now.
I was there's so many things that I want to cover that you have just brought to such wonderful, articulation. And before we start to venture into your role, of bringing your background and your experience as an artist into the current position that you have, I want to take a step back and think about your you speak of having collectors and your ability to present and apply and get into these jurred shows like Swaya and like Herd. When was it the moment that you realized that you had hit a pinnacle of success? And success can be defined in any fashion that you want to define it. We've had some people define it in terms of economic, capitalistic perspectives of success. Others address it more from cultural perspectives. Some people address it even from sobriety ideas. And so I wondered what your definition of success is, and when did you realize that you reached that?
There is two definitions I use, or I have used. One recently succeeded itself. The first one was, of course, I talked about the ribbons being part of the shows. That meant so much. It meant so much to kind of get a ribbon for something. And so the beadwork created that path towards that. And then one year during the Indie Market, I won, actually that same year, when Aljo was recognized as that Artist of the Year, that was my goal. And I met that goal a couple years later. I also won Artist of the Year for the Indian Arts and Crafts Association. So that was a check mark. Like I reached that point, and now what? Now what's the next thing to do? Then after that, that same year, I also won at the Indian Market's Best of Show for the clothing contest for a green ball gown dress that I did call Indian Girls Go to Balls Too. And so this had a different concepts, including the tray cloth. That was a traditional style tray cloth used with the implementing the beadwork, the floral style, along with the elk teeth. So that was a grand year for my work, and that kind of was the pinnacle for the outside, kind of like what I call the Western concept of success in the art industry. And after that, it was just kind of like, okay, we're kind of done with that. And it was interesting because just recently I was cleaning up my studio, and all of the ribbons that I have, I kind of just tucked them away and I put them aside because that's kind of done. And now I'm taking this concept now where I want to help young people learn this path. And what I hear a lot when I do some demonstrations via my personal Facebook or Snapchat or what have you, a lot of the responses are, I wish I grew up in that environment where those things were available. Of course, Navajo Cultural Arts Program is one of those avenues. Of course, you have other individuals too who don't have the time to dedicate to the program. And so therefore, they're more like family-based individuals, they're more like friends. And I did that with a really good close friend of mine, Mr. Andy Nez. He kept wanting to buy one of my squash blossoms that I usually make, the male version without the blossom, just the necklace with the naja at the end. And so one year I told him, I said, I'm going to give you a Christmas gift, but you're going to have to make it yourself. And so we spent a week in building the concept of this necklace. And we spent a day nonstop from when he arrived that morning at 7 o'clock to that evening about 10 on building this necklace. He built the beads, he did the tufa casting. He would mess up and burn the bead, but we would be like, okay, it's time to restart all over again. Kind of like what I went through with Mr. Ronald, the late Ronald Cohn. And so I'm inspired by that. And the second part to what you just mentioned about where you reach your pinnacle was that my Che at this point right now, he does not produce as much anymore due to his age, his vision. And so therefore, every time I complete something, I finish it. And I try to make every effort before I decide to put it on the market or before someone that I made it for decides to take it. I try to make that opportunity to make sure he sees it. And so every time I bring it. And every time I bring it, it started with responses like, you should have done it like this. Should, don't, need, should, change. So it started with that. And now I notice it's more like, damn, JT, now what? So that's the goal. That's what I see. And so it's emotional just because of what he started with me, my late grandmother leaving. Everything that he created, I never knew it had a tie to her. So he would always say, don't use this. Your grandma doesn't like that. Use this. So I still get that today. So the concept changed on those pieces from doing half bead wire to twist wire because she loves twist wire. So that's the method I use. And I'm sorry, it means a lot to me.
No, I completely understand. Even, I mean, the same process I had with my grandmother and my weavings and bringing it to her. And it does, there's that sense of accomplishment, even from, just getting a nod. That's what I would get. I would get a nod. Okay, that's, the next one. Now the next one, that's nana. And so, but you can totally feel that. And it's one of the things that I love about the Navajo Cultural Arts Program, which, by the way, we love Andy Nez. He's awesome. And just, even the work that he does with language. So if you guys haven't checked out his Facebook page, check out his Facebook page. He does like a Navajo language in 10 seconds series. Being able to, how do I explain this? Like the people that we work with in our program, and I'm not going to lie, we don't pay like what Ivy League, right, people get for our classes in terms of adjuncting, and even, faculty pay, but the people that come to our program to teach don't come because they're looking for salary. They're coming because they're looking to not even just give back, but to give forward. And so that's what I hear you talking about. And I'm like, man, we should get JT to come teach us, to get forward. And so they donate, like the Teddy Drapers, the Lyndon Sosies, the Tonopah-Natanis, the Velma Craigs. They do it because they have this gift and this vision, and they want to see it perpetuate, and they want to see it pushed forward and obviously succeed into the future at whatever capacity it is. And I can hear that when you speak about your grandmother and your grandfather, because whatever you're giving forward, it brings them with them. And so it's like this condensed time capsule of the past, present, and future that you work with. And so it's almost ceremonial to when you take a look at it from that kind of component. So so emotions are welcome. And so, what would you think about in terms of like your biggest challenge in making your work and succeeding as a Navajo artist? What has been your biggest challenge thus far? Obviously, we see your future as an artist going like for decades more, but up to now, what has been that challenge?
I think the challenge has been pretty much within the studio, of course, is the patience, but at first it was like that. At first it was a lot of patience, a lot of learning, but now it's not involving the concept or the building itself. Within that realm, I use a process of Shapik echo. I use that methodology in everything that I that I create. And there's always an opening to everything that I have. And I always tell people when I make them something, I said, I know where the entry is to that piece. And I had a young lady who is a weaver purchase a ring from me recently, and she messaged me and she goes, I found the door. And she saw where the way into the ring was, because she's a weaver too. And she goes, I don't know if you did this on purpose or she goes, it's because I'm a weaver and I always leave an opening, but I saw that you have a different area here. And I said, yeah, you figured it out. And she was very thankful of that, because I don't want to keep myself in that piece at the same time. But the challenge at the beginning was learning the patience, learning the concept. I've always been great with color combinations, but the challenge is outside of that studio. Artist to artist, you know, I've seen friendships kind of get pushed aside when it comes to the selling of art. I've seen animosities arise from artist to artist. And I think at this point, our generations moving forward, we really need to discourage much of that from happening. And of course, the ideals of what a lot of artists say is they're copying me. And you see the blasts done on social media. And I'm just like, if you look at the learning side and the inspiration that you did to create these pieces, you bring something unique to the table, but you add your own ideals and characteristics to those creations. The other part also includes, outside of that challenge, I'm very thankful to the demographic of individuals I've been selling to. But what I really discourage seeing, especially through this virtual year that we've been in, I've seen individuals always bring down an artist for their price of their piece. And I always find that very disrespectful when you bring down an artist on their price of their piece, because of the work, time, and effort that they put into it. Not only the cost of the material to buy the raw materials to build that piece. I don't create my own stones. I buy them already prefabricated. So I don't have to worry about that part. So that cost isn't added into my final cost. But one time I did a tour through Thunderbird on my Snapchat, and I showed how much this cost, and this cost, plus my effort and time to building those pieces. So when I always post something, I say there's 36 pieces in this one ring, and I will count them for you and show you. And I do an outline of how much and where each piece comes together on my work that I do. That's the other part too. As consumers, you know, I've seen people gladly purchase Louis Vuitton, Prada, what have you. But when it comes to your own people's work, it's like, that costs too much. And I'm just like over here thinking like, well, you're actually walking around with a designer bag. I'm pretty sure you can invest in this piece. And so that probably goes into the next point I want to make is, you know, these things are investments into who we are as Navajo people. You know, the things that we have and we have here on this earth are our treasures. Those things identify you, but they're going to get carried on to the individuals within your family, with outside your family. I've seen my late grandmother, you know, gift people with a necklace she had on. She took it off and she gave it to her friend, and it went off on its journey to with another family. Things like that. The concept of the good benefits of what artists do and what they create for themselves. So in the realm of going back to the studio, my workstation is my safe place. It's been my safe place this past year from all of the dangers that surrounded our Navajo nation. And the line of work that I do, it's also my takeaway from all of this. Once I leave this office, I go back and I enter that safe place, and everything's tuned out and I can just create. And that's my inspiration and my goal every time is to build something, inspire the world, and wherever it may go, it will also benefit that person, whether they want to keep it for themselves, whether they decide to gift it to somebody else. Before I go any further, if you can take some time, go to jtwillie.com. I have a contest for a handmade squash blossom. I'm giving it out on Mother's Day. The winner will be announced on Mother's Day, but you have from today until April 30th to enter the contest. You have to recognize in a 60 minute, we probably could talk for 60 minutes, 60-second about your mother and what she has done for you, how she has inspired you, how she has helped you get to this point. And unfortunately, I have a lot of friends who have lost their mother this past year. And you could do this in honor of her and keep it in recognition of your mom. That's how I grew up. My mom always says, you got this money for this reason. Buy something, buy a piece of jewelry to remember that. So there's a lot of pieces that I have that I know from here, and I think that money came from here, and that's why I bought that bracelet, or that's why I have that piece of jewelry. It has a significant meaning to me. So I just wanted to add that before we go any further.
I am all about competitions and this, but no, it's great to see that. So definitely, guys, check out one more time, JT, if you could tell us the website that
yeah, it's www.jtwillie.com.
All right, guys, you guys heard it, so go ahead and check it out. And it's a 60-second video about your mom, right? And so it's definitely something to take a look at. But the way that you weave in your family into the work that you do, it's very clear speaking to you. And that's why I'm so glad we've had the opportunity to sit down and talk. Now, let's get into a little bit about the crux of the work that you're doing, right? We've mentioned COVID a couple of times. How has your background as an artist directly contributed to the work that you do now with the economic development?
The connection kind of doesn't have a connection, but I've always felt that the Navajo economy is very unique. We're not normal. We're not Gallup. We're not Farmington. We'll never be Las Vegas. We will never be Albuquerque. We're very unique just because of the land structure we're in, the rural settings of our areas, and of course, most importantly to me, the respects for all of those areas we call home. I really don't want to see a Walmart within the vicinity of my house, and I'm pretty sure many of you also don't want to see that. But there are some needs and necessities to put out there, small grocery stores to keep people local, all of those concepts. And so I started my career at Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise. I finished 12 years there, and I left in 2016, where I decided to go to the Fort Defiant Hospital Board Incorporated Telto Medical Center. And I started there that Monday after in 2016. And from there, I worked all the way until this point. Never would have thought I would become a political appointee. Never would have thought I would have decided to really support a candidate for the presidency of Navajo Nation. And so that led up to this point right now where I assisted in that process, and then I walked away from it. I finished it. The candidate I was supporting won the seat, and I was done with my job from that area on November 7th, 2018. That was done. The door closed. My mom was the first one to text me saying, "Congratulations, I hope you be at work tomorrow." So I returned back to my job, and my job there at the hospital was more health focused. My background's marketing, my background's HR. And so that's where I can contribute to the Navajo Cultural Arts program. I have a strong background in marketing. I have a strong background in building up media, whether it's for publications, whether it's also for creating portfolios for your artwork. That's a contribution that I'm willing to contribute to the program. But going back to my career, and then I decided to apply for this program to be a division director, an executive director. And then I was selected. My parents, my grandparents, my grandfather, they were going to the inauguration that January of 2019. And I didn't have plans to even go there. They didn't know I applied for the job. And then I let them know that. I called my mom that morning. I said, "I'm going to be at the inauguration." And she goes, "Oh, good, you're going to be here." And she goes, "We'll save a seat for you." I said, "I think I have a seat saved for me, but I will meet you after the ceremony." And she goes, "Okay." So then I walked in and I got seated at the level below where they sat all of the new individuals coming in. It got to the point where the president's speech came to recognize his new cabinet, and he asked them to stand. I stood up, and from that point on, it's pretty much been history for me. And I remember my first meeting was that same day after the inauguration, and it continued from there. It's a very nonstop position. And I very encourage our younger people to apply and assume for these duties. There's that time of change that I see happening. There's a time of change that I see in a lot of our leaderships, from the chapter level to the council level to these key positions that run these Navajo Nation divisions. And I'm glad to be kind of like at the beginning of that, but I'm looking to you all, Christine, Miss Little Ben, many others, to be part of that methodology to really gear the Navajo Nation into a new perspective of leadership. And in speaking to the economy, where I come in as an artist in this field, we entered COVID. When I interviewed for the position back in January of 2019, they didn't ask me a question was, how are you going to guide the Navajo Nation through a pandemic? That was not one of the questions. It was every other question. It was a 6-hour-long interview, but none of those questions said, how are you going to guide the Navajo Nation through a pandemic? How are you going to guide the economy through a pandemic? COVID happened. My mom and I came back from the Heard Museum. My mom's my travel partner to all these shows, and she's the reason why I do these shows, actually. And we went to the Heard, we came back, and the second case happened on the nation. From there on, we all know the history. Things shut down. A lot of people, unfortunately, left us this past year. And so therefore, the concept on building up the program that we did was the Navajo Artists Relief Program, and also the Navajo Business Program, small business. The beginning conversations of that program started in May of 2020. And so therefore, it was always my intent that you have to contribute to the artists as well with all this money coming from the federal government. $700 million. And now in this new program coming up, there's expected to be over $1 billion coming to the Navajo Nation. How are we going to use it? So therefore, my biggest thrive every time was there has to be a program for artists. You have to support them. I know them. I'm friends with them. I buy from them. We've all bought from them in some form or fashion, whether they're a well-established artist at these art shows or whether they are an independent owned artist who uses it for self-income. And they sell at places like what we see at the parks here on Navajo, Earls and Gallup. Every concept and demographic of artists was my intention. So therefore, myself and my team developed the small business relief program, but I kept saying, we have to do something for the artists. I'm very happy that our fund program, majority of it, 60%, 65% of it went to artists. And the remainder of that went to small businesses. That proves there is an economy of Navajo art on the Navajo Nation that we have yet to recognize. So in my concluding reports that I did to leadership, I said, we're identifying every aspect of the Navajo economy when it comes to such things as what we were doing with natural resources, the coal plants, the coal mines. We're doing solar development, renewable development, but also you're missing the fact that aside from the enterprises, aside from Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise, with all due respects to every one of those areas that we've been traditionally used to, a traditional concept of economy that we've always had since we've had our existence as five-finger people is our art. So therefore, this fund program should tell you the investments to these individuals and artists is very high. And therefore, that should be part of the dialogue moving forward now. There should be an area of the economy that supports the Navajo artisan, the Native American artisan, and all forms and fashions to what they do. It was very inspiring to see individuals come out when we opened up the program. And we tried our best to keep people local and home as much as possible, but we know the infrastructure incapabilities we have with internet, Wi-Fi, cell service. So therefore, they had to make the trip out to see us. 3 individuals stick with me through this whole program, and they always traveled from south of Pinyon, always came out, spoke nothing but Navajo. And it was 2 sisters and a brother, and they were all in their older age, and they were all weavers. And it was very inspiring to help them fill out their application, ask them questions, and then also at the end, provide them that $5,000 paycheck. We're so thankful. And I always remember the oldest one saying, I was their dad by clan. So every time they came back, they were like, "Shija Haja, Shija Shan, Shija JT Shan." They were always asked by staff. I knew it was them, so I would always make every opportunity to make sure I'm able to help them. But when they got that check, they were like, "Tian, KFC, go eat ash." They wanted to go eat at KFC after they got that check. It just took me back. It took me back to my childhood. It took me back to all of that. So I'm really looking forward to creating another program this year with my team, and also adding the Navajo cultural arts industry to our map of the Navajo economy moving forward.
All I'm saying is yes, yes, yes. You know, it's really inspiring to hear that, because I think as part of the Navajo Cultural Arts Program, actually we have 2 classes in our certificate program. In our BFA program, there's more, but the certificate program itself has 2 classes dedicated to selling practices and understanding economic business systems. And a lot of times when we're doing advertisements, we get a lot of kickback from the public, because they're like, why are you teaching all of this business component? The arts don't, the cultural arts aren't associated with this capitalistic enterprise. And I teach that class. So I'm always like, no, guys, if we really, really, really take a look at this, if we really start to analyze this and understand the core of who we are as Navajo people, and understanding the position of arts in its economic realm, understanding how is built into that from the very, very origins, right? Time immemorial, we can understand the transition of how economic systems have taken place throughout our existence. And so I'm really grateful for that type of perspective. And so my students will be watching this, by the way, so take notes. But JT, I really wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us. We're starting to wrap up a little bit. We have a question that has come in about your necklace. If you could show us your necklace and tell us a little bit about your necklace, and then we'll start to close up.
So this necklace is one of my coral beads that I wear. Has the jot oath on there. It also has the jot oath that's put onto the necklace. It's called Shaka Coral. I made this piece. It also has the silver tubing that I also cut, and I incorporated in with it. There's 13 strands on this particular necklace. It also has the wrap on the back up there, and it's been one of the first coral necklaces I have made. I did put all of my coral away since the beginning of the pandemic, just out of respect for what was going on. And my grandma's corals are safely tucked away. I was going to wear that today, but I thought I would wear this piece in significance for our conversation today.
Well, there you guys have it. A JT original that he's wearing himself. Before we end today, we always ask our guests who come onto the series, when you hear the phrase what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that type of phrasing?
It's a phrase that I've always heard from my Che. He's always been the only one to kind of say that to me. He would always say, "Oh, what's the pay, JT?" And it seems like every time that I've succeeded in something, he's always said it continuously. He still says it when I go and I visit him on the weekends, or whenever I see him. That's the departing words I hear every time. What's the pay, what's the pay, yego ant, shma gi so yosh lina shma, yego shi yaje, yego ant, what's the pay, yego intka nadnish, aro akwet eya, yego antikes, yego bayone di art el nkegi. Those things stick, and with the bay is my driving force, actually. So it's interesting that that's part of this conversation that we're having. It's part of what you all are doing in the series. With the bay has always been something I live by. And when I gave my confirmation speech to the Navajo Nation Council, when I was going through my selection process, I mentioned that. I said, these are things that I was always told. Yego, yego, nadnish chiyaje. My mom would always say to me, and that sticks with me. It's do it yourself. You're responsible for your own ways. You're responsible for your own learning. Take advantage of it and grow. Don't be dependent on us. But I noticed to this day that the role has changed. growing up, it was my mom, my dad, my grandparents continuously taking care of me, growing me up. Then within the last 5 years, I've seen that role change. And so now the role involves me. I feel like I'm the parent sometimes because I can't find my mom and dad in Walmart, but I'm providing, I'm there, I've learned, and I'm giving back all of this wonderful gift of life to this point. And so now it's my turn as their child to repay all of that respect. So Yego is my motto in life.
JT, I want to thank you so much for joining us today for this segment of Tall with a Bit. We will be back at the first week. Gosh, I can't believe we're already entering in April, guys. But please jump back into us at that time, same time, same channel. And of course, please visit JT's website, participate in his competition, but also take a look at his pieces and enjoy and explore the innovation that's coming from our Navajo youth. And yes, we are still youth. So I'm a little bit older than you. So if I consider myself a youth, that's definitely a youth. So everybody on our KXWR, thank you for joining us. And on Facebook Live, thank you also for joining us. Everybody in our Zoom room, thank you guys. Have a great Wednesday and we will see you soon.
Ne jana ko wo be ha den ste. Ne jana ko tegen go be ha den ste. Hey yana.